Captain Marcus Trevan was at the helm of his spacecraft, the Horizon, navigating through the vast, uncharted regions of the Perseus Arm. The mission was supposed to be routine, surveying potential habitable planets and gathering data for future expeditions. However, as they ventured deeper into the unknown, the sensors picked up something strange. A distortion in the space-time continuum, something that wasn't in the mission brief. "Captain, we're detecting an anomaly," the ship's AI Phoenix announced, its voice calm but tinged with curiosity. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes narrowing at the display. The anomaly was a cluster of unknown energy signatures, all converging on their position at an alarming rate. Before he could give an order, the Horizon shuddered violently, alarms blaring as multiple ships decloaked around them, sleek, agile vessels that bore the markings of an unknown, highly advanced civilization. "Shields up. All hands to battle stations," Marcus commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos erupting around him. The enemy ships moved with precision, their advanced weaponry overwhelming the Horizon's defenses in minutes. The crew fought valiantly, but the battle was hopelessly one-sided. As the ship's systems failed one by one, Marcus realized that they had no chance of escape. His final command was to initiate the ship's emergency distress beacon before a blast from the lead enemy ship rendered him unconscious. When Marcus awoke, he found himself in a cold, dimly lit cell. The walls were made of a strange, smooth metal that seemed to absorb sound, leaving an eerie silence. His hands and feet were shackled, the cuffs emitting a low hum that indicated some sort of energy field, likely designed to suppress his strength. As he took in his surroundings, the cell door slid open with a hiss. Two towering figures entered. Women clad in ornate armor that seemed to blend seamlessly with their muscular frames. They had fierce, predatory eyes that locked onto Marcus with unsettling intensity. These were the Valkyrie, a race of warrior women whose reputation for ruthlessness in combat was known across the galaxy, though most believed them to be myths. One of them, evidently the leader, stepped forward and spoke in a voice that was both melodic and menacing. "Human, you have been captured by the Valkyrie. You will be taken before the High Council where your fate will be decided." Without waiting for a response, the Valkyrie seized Marcus by the arms and dragged him out of the cell. His mind raced, trying to comprehend what had just happened. His ship was gone, his crew was either dead or captured, and he was now a prisoner of a race whose brutality was legendary. The odds were grim, but Marcus was determined to find a way to survive. Marcus was led through a series of winding corridors that seemed to pulse with a dim reddish light. The architecture was alien yet imposing, with walls adorned with what looked like trophies from countless battles, blades, armor pieces, and skulls of creatures Marcus had never seen before. The air was thick with the scent of incense, mixed with the metallic tang of blood. The Valkyrie escorted him into a vast chamber at the heart of their stronghold. The room was circular, with tiered seating surrounding a central platform. At the far end of the chamber, seated on a throne made of dark metal and bone, was the Valkyrie High Warden, a figure of undeniable authority and power. The High Warden was taller than the other Valkyrie, her armor more elaborate, with intricate engravings that told stories of past conquests. Her eyes were a piercing shade of green, cold and calculating. As Marcus was forced to his knees before her, he could feel her gaze piercing through him, assessing him not just as a prisoner, but as a challenge. "You are the captain of the human ship that dared to trespass into our territory," the High Warden began, her voice echoing through the chamber. "You and your crew have been captured as spoils of war, to be used as we see fit. Your life is forfeit, but we are not without mercy." She gestured to the other Valkyrie warriors in the chamber, who stood silently, their expressions unreadable. "We are a society that values strength above all. We believe that only the strong have the right to survive. Therefore, we will give you a chance to prove your worth." The High Warden leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "You will fight in our Coliseum, against the fiercest warriors and beasts from across the galaxy. If you survive, you may earn your freedom. If you fail, your life will end in the arena, and your bones will join the others in our halls." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The Coliseum. He had heard stories of alien civilizations that held brutal gladiatorial games, but he had never imagined he would become a participant in one. The thought of fighting for his life day after day against creatures he couldn't even imagine was terrifying, but it was also his only chance at survival. "I accept your terms," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. "I will fight." The High Warden smiled, a cold, predatory grin. "Good. Then your trial begins at dawn. May the strongest prevail." The Valkyrie warriors dragged Marcus back to his cell, where he spent the night preparing himself for the battle to come. He had no weapons, no armor, and no allies. All he had was his will to survive, and the knowledge that failure meant death. As he sat in the darkness, he steeled himself for the fight ahead, knowing that he would have to be smarter, faster, and stronger than he had ever been before. The first rays of dawn began to filter through the tiny window of his cell. Marcus knew that his trial was about to begin. With a deep breath he stood, ready to face whatever horrors awaited him in the Coliseum. He was determined to fight, to survive, and to earn his freedom no matter the cost. As the first light of dawn touched the alien world, Marcus was roughly escorted from his cell and led through the labyrinthine corridors of the Valkyrie stronghold. The echoes of distant cheers reached his ears, growing louder with every step. It was the sound of the Coliseum, an arena where strength was the only law and weakness meant death. The corridor opened up to a massive sunlit arena. The Coliseum was an architectural marvel, a blend of ancient stone and advanced technology. Tiered seats packed with Valkyrie spectators rose high above the blood-stained sand of the arena floor. The crowd's excitement was palpable, a sea of eager faces awaiting the spectacle of violence and death. Marcus was shoved into a preparation chamber at the edge of the arena, where he was greeted by an unexpected sight. A small cache of weapons. Swords, spears, and shields of various sizes were displayed, each one more brutal than the last. But there was no time to consider his options carefully. He knew the Valkyrie had not given him these weapons out of kindness. They wanted a show. As he examined the weapons, a Valkyrie warrior entered the chamber. She was tall and powerful, her presence dominating the room. Her face was partially concealed by a battle helmet, but her eyes, cold and calculating, locked onto Marcus with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. "You will face the trial of beasts," she stated bluntly, her voice harsh and unyielding. "This is the first test. Survive and you may continue. Fail, and you will be nothing but another body for the carrion." Marcus nodded, his mind racing. He knew he needed to choose a weapon that would give him the best chance of survival against whatever horrors the Valkyrie had prepared for him. He picked up a sword, a long, slightly curved blade that felt balanced in his hand, and a sturdy shield. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. The warrior gave a brief nod of approval. "Good choice. May your death be swift if it comes." With those final words, she led Marcus out into the arena. The roar of the crowd was deafening as he stepped onto the sand, the heat from the sun beating down on him. The Coliseum was vast, and from every angle, Valkyrie eyes watched him, eager to see how this human would fare against their challenge. A massive gate at the far end of the arena began to rise, the chains clanking loudly as it opened. Marcus tightened his grip on his sword and shield, his heart pounding in his chest. He had no idea what to expect, but he knew it would be something deadly. The gate fully opened, and from the darkness emerged a beast unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. It was a Raxar, a massive reptilian creature with scales as tough as armor and claws that could shred steel. Its eyes gleamed with a feral intelligence, and its roar shook the very walls of the Coliseum. Marcus took a deep breath, forcing himself to focus. This was it, his first test. The creature charged at him with terrifying speed, and Marcus barely had time to dive out of the way as its claws raked the ground where he had just stood. The battle was on. The Raxar circled Marcus, its movements fluid and predatory. The crowd's roars faded into the background as Marcus concentrated on the beast before him. He knew that his only chance of survival was to exploit the creature's weaknesses, if it had any. The Raxar lunged again, its jaws snapping shut with a sound that made Marcus's blood run cold. He dodged to the side, slashing at the creature's flank with his sword. The blade glanced off its thick scales, barely leaving a scratch. Marcus cursed under his breath, realizing that brute force alone would not be enough to defeat this monster. He retreated, trying to buy himself time to think. The Raxar was strong and fast, but it was also massive, which meant it might be less agile. He needed to find a way to slow it down, to strike where its defenses were weakest. As the beast charged once more, Marcus ran toward a cluster of jagged rocks that jutted out from the arena floor. He used the terrain to his advantage, leading the Raxar into a narrow gap between the rocks. The creature followed, but its large size made it difficult for it to maneuver in the confined space. This was his chance. With the Raxar momentarily slowed, Marcus leaped onto one of the rocks and jumped onto the beast's back, driving his sword into the softer flesh behind its head. The creature roared in pain, thrashing violently in an attempt to throw him off, but Marcus held on, driving the blade deeper. Blood spurted from the wound, and the Raxar's movements became more frantic, its strength waning. Marcus knew he had to finish it quickly, or risk being thrown off and torn apart. He gripped the sword with both hands and twisted it, cutting through muscle and sinew until he reached the creature's spine. With a final agonized roar, the Raxar collapsed to the ground, its body twitching before finally going still. Marcus leaped off the beast, his chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. The crowd erupted in a deafening cheer, their bloodlust momentarily satisfied by the spectacle of the human's victory. But Marcus knew this was only the beginning. The Valkyrie would not be content with a single victory. There would be more trials, more battles, and each one would be more dangerous than the last. The Valkyrie warrior from before reappeared, stepping into the arena as the carcass of the Raxar was dragged away by mechanized drones. She regarded Marcus with a mixture of surprise and respect, though her expression remained hard. "You've survived the first trial," she said, her tone grudgingly impressed. "But do not think you are free yet. The Coliseum is not done with you. There are more tests to come, and each will push you to your limits." Marcus wiped the blood from his sword and met her gaze with determination. "I'll face whatever comes next," he said, his voice steady. "I'm not dying here." The warrior's eyes gleamed with something that might have been admiration, or perhaps it was simply the anticipation of the battles yet to come. She turned and gestured for him to follow her. "Rest while you can," she said as they left the arena. "Your next trial will be soon, and it will be even more difficult than the last. You'll need all your strength if you hope to survive." As Marcus was led back to his cell, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a fight for survival. The Valkyrie were testing him, yes, but there was something else at play, something he didn't yet understand. He would need to be not just strong, but cunning if he was to win his freedom and uncover the truth behind these trials. The battle for his life had only just begun. Marcus was given only a few hours to rest before the next trial. His body ached from the battle with the Raxar, but his mind was sharp, fueled by the adrenaline of survival and the determination to see this through. He knew that each trial would be more difficult, designed to test not only his physical strength, but also his resolve and ingenuity. The Valkyrie warrior, who had become his reluctant guide, appeared at the entrance of his cell. She was accompanied by two other Valkyrie, their faces hidden behind imposing helmets. Without a word, they escorted him back to the arena. The silence was heavy with anticipation. As they reached the Coliseum's entrance, Marcus was handed a new weapon, a double-edged glaive with a long reinforced handle. The weapon was heavier than his previous sword, but it offered more range, which he knew would be crucial for what was to come. The arena was different this time. Instead of a wide open space, it had been transformed into a labyrinth of narrow corridors and high walls, each section filled with traps, obstacles, and hidden dangers. The crowd above watched eagerly, their cheers echoing off the stone and metal structures. The Valkyrie warrior finally spoke, her voice cutting through the noise. "This is the trial of the maze. Your task is to reach the center, where your opponent awaits. The path is treacherous, and you will need more than just strength to survive. Remember, the maze is alive. It shifts and changes, and it will try to consume you." Marcus nodded, gripping the glaive tightly. He had faced similar challenges during his military training on Earth, but this was different. The Valkyrie had designed this trial to be more than just a physical challenge. It was a psychological one, meant to disorient and break him. The gate behind him closed with a loud clang, and the trial began. Marcus moved cautiously, his senses heightened as he entered the maze. The walls were covered in vines that seemed to pulse with a life of their own, and the ground beneath his feet was uneven, littered with debris. He could hear the distant sounds of machinery, gears grinding, metal shifting as the maze adjusted itself, blocking paths and opening new ones. He advanced slowly, using the glaive to test the ground ahead of him. He narrowly avoided a pitfall trap concealed by a thin layer of sand, and sidestepped a wall that suddenly shot out spikes, intended to impale anything in its path. Each step was a calculated risk, and Marcus quickly realized that speed alone wouldn't be enough to navigate this maze. As he rounded a corner, he encountered the first of the maze's inhabitants, a group of agile, predatory creatures with razor-sharp claws and fangs. They were small but fast, moving in coordinated packs. Marcus swung his glaive in wide arcs, using its reach to keep the creatures at bay. The first few fell easily, but the others quickly adapted, attacking from multiple angles. Marcus's military training kicked in as he switched to a more defensive stance, using the narrow corridors to limit the number of creatures that could attack him at once. He fought with precision, striking only when he saw an opening. One by one, the creatures fell, but Marcus knew that this was only the beginning. As he progressed deeper into the maze, the traps became more sophisticated, the creatures more dangerous. At one point, he found himself in a chamber filled with poisonous gas, the walls closing in to crush him. He managed to escape by triggering a hidden mechanism that vented the gas and opened a secret passage, but the experience left him gasping for breath, his vision blurred. The maze continued to shift around him, and Marcus began to lose his sense of direction. The sounds of the crowd above grew distant, replaced by the unsettling noises of the maze itself. Whispers that seemed to come from the walls, the creaking of metal, and the occasional growl of a hidden predator. But Marcus pressed on, driven by the knowledge that his survival depended on reaching the center. He knew the Valkyrie were watching, analyzing his every move, and he refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing him break. Finally, after what felt like hours of relentless challenges, Marcus reached the center of the maze. The space was a circular arena within the arena, illuminated by a shaft of light that poured down from an opening above. In the center of the space stood his opponent, a Valkyrie warrior, taller and more imposing than any he had faced before. She wore sleek, battle-scarred armor, and her weapon was a massive warhammer, its head crackling with energy. The warrior saluted him with a nod, acknowledging his arrival. "You've done well to make it this far, human," she said, her voice amplified by the arena's acoustics. "But this is where your journey ends. Only one of us will leave this place alive." Marcus took a deep breath, readying himself. This was the final challenge of the maze, the culmination of everything he had fought through. He knew that defeating this Valkyrie would require not just strength and skill, but also the will to push beyond his limits. The Valkyrie warrior moved first, her warhammer crashing down with a force that shook the ground. Marcus narrowly avoided the blow, feeling the shockwave as it passed by him. He countered with a quick strike of his glaive, aiming for her exposed flank, but she was faster than he expected, parrying the attack with the shaft of her warhammer. They circled each other, each looking for an opening. The Valkyrie warrior's movements were deliberate and powerful, each swing of her warhammer calculated to either crush or disarm. Marcus realized that her style was based on overwhelming force. She relied on her strength and the destructive power of her weapon to dominate her opponents. But Marcus knew that brute force alone wouldn't be enough to defeat him. He needed to use his agility and the environment to his advantage. The circular arena was littered with debris from previous battles, and the walls were lined with jagged spikes and other hazards. He began to incorporate the surroundings into his strategy, luring the Valkyrie into positions where her attacks would be hindered by the obstacles. The duel was intense, each clash of weapons sending sparks flying. Marcus could feel his muscles straining, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The Valkyrie warrior was relentless, her warhammer smashing through everything in its path. But Marcus was patient, waiting for the moment when she would overcommit to an attack. That moment came when she swung her warhammer in a wide arc, aiming to finish him with a single decisive blow. Marcus sidestepped the attack, using the momentum of her swing to guide her into one of the spiked walls. The warrior stumbled, her warhammer momentarily stuck in the wall, and Marcus seized the opportunity. With a swift, precise motion, he drove the blade of his glaive into the gap between her armor plates, piercing her side. The Valkyrie warrior grunted in pain, her warhammer falling from her grasp as she staggered back, but she wasn't done yet. With a roar of defiance, she pulled the glaive from her wound and hurled it aside, charging at Marcus with nothing but her fists. The force of her charge caught him off guard, and they both tumbled to the ground, locked in a desperate struggle. Marcus fought with everything he had, using his smaller size and agility to avoid her crushing blows. He managed to break free, grabbing a discarded weapon from the ground, a short sword, and drove it into her chest, finally bringing the battle to an end. The Valkyrie warrior gasped, her strength fading as she sank to her knees. "You fought well, human," she said, her voice filled with a grudging respect. "You have earned your victory." Marcus, breathing heavily, nodded. "And you've earned your honor," he replied, pulling the sword free as she collapsed. The crowd above erupted into cheers, their bloodlust sated by the brutal duel. But Marcus barely heard them. He was exhausted, his body battered and bruised, but he had survived. He had defeated the Valkyrie warrior and completed the second trial. As the gate to the arena opened, Marcus was greeted by the same Valkyrie who had guided him before. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a hint of something new in her eyes, perhaps respect, or maybe just acknowledgement of his strength. "You continue to defy expectations," she said as she led him back to his cell. "But there are more trials to come, and they will only grow more difficult. Rest while you can, human. You will need all your strength." Marcus nodded, too tired to respond. He had survived another day in the Coliseum, but he knew that his journey was far from over. The Valkyrie would not be content until they had pushed him to his absolute limit, and he would have to be ready for whatever came next. As he lay down on the cold floor of his cell, Marcus thought of Earth, of the life he had left behind. He didn't know if he would ever see it again, but he refused to give up hope. He would fight, he would survive, and somehow he would find a way to win his freedom. After only a brief respite, Marcus was once again summoned to the arena. This time, as he walked the familiar path through the dark, echoing corridors, he could feel the weight of fatigue pulling at him. His body was sore from the previous battles, and every step seemed to remind him of the cost of survival in this unforgiving place. Yet, his resolve remained unbroken. He knew that each trial brought him closer to his goal: freedom. The Valkyrie warrior, who had been his guide throughout these ordeals, met him at the entrance to the arena. Her eyes were sharp, studying him for any sign of weakness. "Today you face the gauntlet of shadows," she said, her voice carrying a hint of something that might have been concern or perhaps just curiosity. "This trial is unlike the others. You will be pitted against more than just physical opponents. The arena itself will be your enemy." As the gate to the arena opened, Marcus stepped inside, greeted by an eerie silence. The structure of the Coliseum had changed again. The ground was covered in a thick rolling fog that seemed to obscure everything more than a few feet away. The sky above was dark, the light from the suns filtered through a strange swirling mist that made it impossible to tell time or direction. Marcus advanced cautiously, his senses on high alert. He had been given no weapons this time, only his wits and instincts. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional distant sound of something shifting in the fog, something large and unseen. He knew that this trial was designed to break his spirit, to test his mental fortitude as much as his physical strength. The fog played tricks on his mind, distorting sounds and creating phantom images that flickered at the edge of his vision. He could hear whispers, voices that seemed to call his name, taunting him with threats and promises of doom. As Marcus moved deeper into the arena, he began to encounter the first true challenges of the gauntlet. The ground shifted beneath him, revealing hidden pits and traps that opened with little warning. He had to rely on his instincts, leaping and dodging with split-second timing to avoid falling into the depths below. Then came the shadows, spectral figures that emerged from the fog, their forms indistinct and shifting, as if they were made of the darkness itself. They moved silently, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Marcus quickly realized that these were not ordinary opponents. They were manifestations of the arena, designed to exploit his fears and weaknesses. The shadows attacked with a cold, calculated malice, their movements almost impossible to predict. Marcus fought back with everything he had, using the environment to his advantage, but he quickly found that traditional combat tactics were of little use. The shadows could not be fought like physical enemies. They were elusive, vanishing and reappearing in different forms, their strikes coming from unexpected angles. Marcus knew he had to change his approach. He focused on staying calm, keeping his mind clear of fear and doubt. He reminded himself that these creatures, though terrifying, were not invincible. They were part of the arena, and like the traps and obstacles before, they could be outsmarted. He began to notice patterns in their movements, subtle cues that hinted at their next attack. With each encounter, he grew more adept at anticipating their strikes, countering with quick, precise movements. He used the fog to his advantage, disappearing into the mists when necessary, forcing the shadows to search for him and giving himself precious moments to plan his next move. But the trial was relentless, pushing him to the brink of exhaustion. The shadows continued to hound him, their numbers seemingly endless. Just when he thought he could fight no more, the fog began to lift, revealing the end of the gauntlet, a towering structure in the distance, bathed in a faint ethereal light. Summoning the last of his strength, Marcus sprinted toward the light, the shadows closing in behind him. As he neared the structure, the ground beneath him shifted once more, but this time it was different. An opening appeared, revealing a narrow staircase that led upward. Without hesitation, Marcus took the stairs 2 at a time, climbing toward the light. The shadows surged after him, but as he ascended, the light grew brighter, and the shadows began to dissipate, their forms unraveling into wisps of darkness. Finally, he reached the top of the staircase, emerging into a small circular chamber. The light here was blinding, pure, and as it enveloped him, Marcus felt the weight of the trial fall away. The shadows were gone, the fog lifted, and for the first time in what felt like hours, he could breathe freely. At the center of the chamber was a pedestal, upon which rested a single object, a dagger, its blade glowing with the same ethereal light that filled the chamber. Marcus approached it cautiously, reaching out to take the weapon. As his fingers closed around the hilt, the light dimmed slightly, revealing the Valkyrie warrior who had guided him through the trials, standing at the chamber's entrance. "You have completed the Gauntlet of Shadows," she said, her tone carrying a note of respect. "This dagger is your reward. It is a symbol of your resilience and your ability to conquer fear. You have proven yourself worthy, but your trials are not yet over. There is one final test you must face before you can claim your freedom." Marcus nodded, his grip tightening on the dagger. He was exhausted, his body and mind pushed to their limits, but he knew he had come too far to turn back now. Whatever the final trial was, he would face it with the same determination that had brought him this far. The Valkyrie warrior stepped aside, allowing Marcus to descend the staircase and exit the arena. As he walked back to his cell, the cheers of the crowd echoed in his ears, but this time they sounded different, less like the bloodthirsty roars of an audience eager for violence, and more like the recognition of a warrior who had earned their respect. The next morning, Marcus was awakened early. The familiar Valkyrie warrior was waiting for him, her expression more somber than before. "It is time for your final trial," she said, her voice carrying a gravity that sent a chill down Marcus's spine. He followed her to the arena once more, but this time, the atmosphere was different. The Coliseum was eerily quiet, the usual clamor of the crowd replaced by an anticipatory silence. The arena itself was devoid of any traps or obstacles. It was a simple, flat expanse of sand, with nothing but the open sky above. As Marcus stepped into the arena, the gates opposite him opened, and a single figure emerged. It was another Valkyrie warrior, but this one was different from any he had faced before. She was taller, her armor more ornate, and her presence radiated an aura of authority and power. Her eyes were sharp and intelligent, and they locked onto Marcus with a fierce intensity. "This is Zareen," the Valkyrie warrior beside him said, her voice low. "She is the champion of our people, undefeated in combat. To earn your freedom, you must defeat her." Marcus felt his heart pound in his chest. He had faced beasts, shadows, and traps, but this was different. Zareen was a living embodiment of the Valkyrie's strength, and he could tell just by looking at her that this would be the most difficult battle yet. Zareen approached him, her steps measured and confident. She carried a long spear, its blade gleaming in the sunlight, and her stance was that of a seasoned warrior, one who had seen countless battles and emerged victorious every time. "There is no shame in defeat, human," Zareen said, her voice calm but commanding. "But know that I will show you no mercy. If you wish to survive, you must give this fight everything you have." Marcus nodded, his hand tightening around the dagger he had earned in the previous trial. He knew he couldn't rely on strength alone. Zareen was likely stronger, faster, and more experienced than him. But he had come too far to give up now. He had to use every bit of strategy, every lesson he had learned, and every ounce of determination to win this battle. The arena fell silent as the two warriors faced each other. Then, without warning, Zareen struck. Her spear was a blur as it slashed through the air, aiming for Marcus's heart. He barely managed to parry the blow with his dagger, the force of the impact sending a shockwave through his arm. Zareen pressed her attack, her movements fluid and relentless. Marcus was forced on the defensive, using the agility and quick reflexes he had honed in the previous trials to avoid her strikes. But Zareen was relentless, her spear always just a fraction of a second away from ending the fight. Despite the overwhelming pressure, Marcus began to notice something. Zareen's attacks, while powerful, followed a pattern. She was precise, almost methodical in her movements, leaving little room for error. But in her precision, Marcus saw an opportunity. He realized that if he could disrupt her rhythm, even for a moment, he might be able to gain the upper hand. He waited for the right moment, enduring the barrage of attacks with gritted teeth. Then, as Zareen thrust her spear forward, aiming for his chest, Marcus deliberately stepped into the attack, twisting his body at the last second. The spear grazed his side, drawing blood, but the move allowed him to get inside Zareen's guard. With a burst of speed, Marcus drove his dagger towards Zareen's exposed flank. She reacted quickly, twisting to avoid the blow, but the move disrupted her balance. For the first time, she stumbled, her spear dropping slightly. Seizing the opportunity, Marcus pressed the attack. He aimed low, striking at Zareen's legs to further unbalance her. She was forced to retreat, her confident demeanor faltering as Marcus's relentless assault pushed her back. But Zareen was far from defeated. With a snarl, she regained her footing, her spear lashing out with renewed fury. Marcus was driven back, the strength of her counterattack forcing him to dodge and parry desperately. The fight was brutal, both warriors pushing themselves to the limit. Marcus's arms ached from the strain of parrying Zareen's powerful blows, and he could feel his strength waning, but he knew he couldn't give up, not when victory was so close. In a final desperate move, Marcus feigned an attack to Zareen's left, drawing her spear to block. Then with a swift pivot he slashed at her exposed right side, the dagger cutting deep into her armor. Zareen gasped, her spear faltering as she staggered back. Marcus followed up with a powerful strike to her chest, knocking her to the ground. Her spear clattered away, and for a moment the entire arena was silent. Marcus stood over her, his dagger raised, ready to deliver the final blow. But something in Zareen's eyes stopped him, a look of resignation but also respect. She knew she had been defeated, and she accepted it with honor. "You have won, human," Zareen said, her voice calm even in defeat. "Your strength, your resolve, they are worthy of respect. Finish it." But Marcus hesitated. Killing Zareen would secure his freedom, but it felt wrong to end the life of a warrior who had fought so honorably. He lowered his dagger, extending a hand to help her up. Zareen looked at him in surprise, then slowly accepted his hand. As he pulled her to her feet, the crowd erupted in cheers, not just for the victor, but for the display of honor and respect between the two warriors. The Valkyrie warrior who had guided Marcus through the trials stepped forward, a small smile on her lips. "You have proven yourself in every way, Marcus. You have earned your freedom, not just through strength, but through wisdom and compassion. You are free to go." Marcus nodded, his heart swelling with relief and pride. He had done it. He had survived the trials, earned the respect of the Valkyrie, and won his freedom. But as he looked around the arena at the faces of those who had watched him fight, he knew that this experience had changed him forever. Zareen placed a hand on his shoulder, her expression serious. "You are a warrior, Marcus, but you are also more than that. You have the heart of a leader. Use it well wherever your path takes you." With those words, Marcus knew that his journey was far from over. He had won his freedom, but the galaxy was vast, and there were many more challenges to face. But he would face them with the knowledge that he had earned his place among the stars, not just as a survivor, but as a warrior with honor. As he left the Coliseum for the final time, the cheers of the crowd fading behind him, Marcus felt a sense of peace. He had faced the darkest trials and emerged victorious. And now, with his newfound strength and resolve, he was ready to face whatever the future held. Having earned his freedom through combat, Marcus found himself in an unexpected position. The Valkyrie, impressed by his prowess and honor, offered him a place among them as a trainer and strategist. This was an honor rarely bestowed upon outsiders, and it put Marcus at a crossroads. Accepting would mean a life of respect and purpose among the Valkyrie, but refusing might alienate his newfound allies and possibly endanger his passage back to human territories. As he contemplated his decision, Marcus spent his days in the Valkyrie capital, observing their ways and customs. He saw a civilization built on strength and honor, but also one that was slowly recognizing the need for change. His discussions with Arya, who had quietly supported his journey from captive to champion, revealed deeper currents of dissent and reform within the Valkyrie society. Arya, sensing his conflict, offered her perspective. "You've shown us that strength is not just physical, Marcus. It's also the courage to defend one's values and the wisdom to lead. You could help us bridge the gap between our traditions and the changes we need to embrace." Her words struck a chord with Marcus. He saw an opportunity not just to survive, but to influence a powerful culture, to help steer the Valkyrie towards a more enlightened path. The decision weighed heavily on him, a testament to his deepening connection to this alien world and its people. After days of reflection, Marcus made his decision. He stood before the Valkyrie High Council, the same formidable group that had once judged him as merely a combatant for their entertainment. Now, they awaited his response, aware of his potential impact on their society. "I am honored by your offer," Marcus began, his voice steady and clear. "I've learned much from the Valkyrie. You are a people of extraordinary strength and resilience, and I respect your traditions. However, if I am to stay, it must be as a bridge between our worlds, not as a weapon for your arenas." The council murmured among themselves, surprised by his bold stance. The High Warden, who had overseen his trials, nodded slowly. "You speak of change, human. It is not something we embrace lightly, but perhaps it is time. Your courage has already begun to inspire it." Marcus's proposal was simple yet revolutionary. He would stay with the Valkyrie to establish a training program not just for warriors, but also for diplomats and scouts, fostering a broader understanding of the galaxy and its myriad cultures. His experiences as a human among aliens would serve as the foundation for a new era of Valkyrie exploration and interaction, one based on mutual respect rather than dominance. The council agreed, and Marcus set to work. With Arya by his side, he began to train a new generation of Valkyrie, ones who would see the galaxy not as a battlefield, but as a community of diverse beings with much to teach each other. His training sessions were intense, blending Valkyrie strength with strategies from his own Earth-based military background, emphasizing honor, wisdom, and diplomacy. As months turned into years, Marcus watched his recruits grow into roles that would have once been unimaginable for their kind. They became ambassadors as well as warriors, researchers as well as defenders. The change was gradual but undeniable, and Marcus's influence on Valkyrie society deepened. However, with change came resistance. Traditionalists viewed Marcus's ideas as a threat to Valkyrie culture, fearing that their identity would be diluted by these foreign concepts. Tensions grew, and it became clear that Marcus's vision for a new Valkyrie would not be realized without a struggle. Despite these challenges, Marcus remained committed to his path. He had seen the Valkyrie at their best and worst, and he believed in their capacity to evolve. With Arya's unwavering support, he continued to push forward, determined to prove that true strength lay in the ability to adapt and grow. His journey from captive to champion to catalyst had transformed not only himself, but also those around him. Marcus had once fought for his freedom in the arena. Now he fought for a vision of peace and unity, hoping to leave a legacy that would endure long after his time with the Valkyrie had passed. As Marcus's influence within Valkyrie society grew, so did the discomfort among the traditionalist factions. His modern training methods and diplomatic teachings were met with skepticism and outright hostility by some who saw them as a betrayal of Valkyrie heritage. These tensions came to a head when a group of traditionalist warriors openly challenged Marcus's teachings during a training session, questioning his authority and the wisdom of the Valkyrie Council for allowing a human to dictate Valkyrie practices. The confrontation escalated quickly. The traditionalists, led by a fierce warrior named Vara, accused Marcus of undermining the core principles that had defined their people for generations. "You bring us weakness, human," Vara declared, her voice echoing through the training grounds. "Your ways will dilute the strength that has made us conquerors and survivors." Marcus faced the challengers calmly, understanding that this was more than a personal attack. It was a pivotal moment for the future of Valkyrie society. Instead of responding with anger, he offered a demonstration, a combat exercise pitting his best trainees against Vara's traditionalists, intending to show the effectiveness of his methods not through words, but through action. The exercise was grueling. Marcus's trainees, who had been taught to integrate strategic thinking and adaptability into their combat styles, contrasted sharply with Vara's warriors, who relied on brute strength and traditional tactics. The battle, while simulated, was intense and revealing. Marcus's team demonstrated a clear edge in versatility and efficiency, gaining the upper hand without sacrificing the fierce spirit the Valkyrie valued. Many who had doubted Marcus's methods could not ignore the results of the exercise. His approach had merit, evidenced by the performance of his trainees who managed to outmaneuver and outthink their opponents in nearly every scenario. This victory did not end the descent, but it earned Marcus a begrudging respect among some of his fiercest critics and reinforced his position within the Valkyrie Council's progressive faction. Buoyed by the success of his trainees, Marcus continued to expand his program, integrating more advanced diplomatic training with traditional Valkyrie martial practices. His vision was slowly coming to fruition. A new cadre of Valkyrie who could navigate the complexities of the galaxy with as much skill in diplomacy as in combat. The true test of Marcus's work came when the Valkyrie were invited to a summit held by a coalition of alien races, aiming to address a series of border conflicts that had threatened peace in the sector. The Valkyrie Council, acknowledging the shift in interstellar dynamics and the need for a more nuanced approach, decided to send a delegation composed of Marcus's trainees, led by Arya. The summit was unlike anything the Valkyrie had participated in before. Races from across the galaxy gathered, each with its own agendas and grievances. Arya and her team, trained in Marcus's methods, navigated the complex diplomatic landscape with a surprising adeptness. They engaged in discussions, formed alliances, and negotiated terms with a maturity and tact that were new to Valkyrie diplomacy. Their success at the summit marked a turning point. When news of their achievements reached the Valkyrie homeworld, even the most stubborn traditionalists could not ignore the benefits of Marcus's teachings. The galaxy was changing, and the Valkyrie were now better equipped to face it without losing their identity. Marcus, watching the reports from the summit, felt a profound sense of accomplishment. His journey had been fraught with challenges and opposition, but now he saw the tangible results of his efforts. The Valkyrie were evolving, stepping onto the galactic stage not just as warriors, but as peacemakers and diplomats. As he prepared for the next phase of his program, Marcus knew that the path ahead would still hold challenges. But he also knew that the Valkyrie were no longer just his students. They were his partners in shaping a future where strength was measured not only by the ability to wield a weapon, but also by the capacity to build bridges. The Valkyrie had once captured him, seeing him as nothing more than a contestant in their brutal games. Now, they looked to him as a leader, a teacher, and a visionary who had helped them redefine their place in the cosmos. Marcus's legacy was no longer just about survival in the arena. It was about forging a legacy of peace and understanding that would endure across the stars. With the Valkyrie gaining a newfound respect on the interstellar stage, Marcus felt a deep satisfaction in his role as a catalyst for change. Yet the undercurrents of discord within Valkyrie society remained, a reminder of the fragile balance between tradition and progress. One evening, as the twin sons of Valkyrie sat in a spectacular display of crimson and gold, Arya approached Marcus. She looked troubled, which was unusual given her usual composure. "Marcus," she began, her voice steady but her eyes betraying her concern. "There's been a development. A faction of traditionalists is rallying, claiming that our new path weakens Valkyrie's heritage. They're calling for a return to the old ways, and they're gaining support." Marcus listened intently, his mind racing through scenarios. He had faced physical challenges and battles of wits, but this political struggle threatened to unravel all they had achieved. "What's their plan?" he asked, knowing that understanding their motives was key to countering their moves. "They wish to challenge the reforms at the upcoming Great Assembly, where all major decisions are made. They will demand a vote to cease all diplomatic initiatives and to reinforce traditional martial practices exclusively," Arya explained. The news was a significant setback, but Marcus was not deterred. He had seen the benefits of his teachings and knew many Valkyrie appreciated the new opportunities his training provided. "We'll need to prepare," he declared. "We'll show them that strength doesn't come from isolation, but from the ability to adapt and grow." Over the following weeks, Marcus and Arya worked tirelessly. They met with influential leaders, gathered support from various sectors of Valkyrie society, and prepared a compelling presentation for the Great Assembly. They highlighted the successes of the diplomatic corps, the economic benefits of new alliances, and personal stories of Valkyrie, who had flourished under the new training programs. The day of the Great Assembly arrived, a momentous occasion with the Grand Hall filled to capacity. Representatives from all walks of Valkyrie life were present, from warriors to scholars, each with their own views on the direction their society should take. Marcus was granted the floor. Standing before the assembly, he spoke with conviction, weaving his own story into the narrative of Valkyrie's potential future. When I first came to Valkyrie, I was an outsider, a captive brought to fight for amusement. But what I found here was a people of incredible potential, stifled by outdated traditions that no longer serve us in a galaxy that is rapidly changing. As Marcus spoke, images of Valkyrie diplomats signing treaties, of young warriors training in both martial and diplomatic arts, and of thriving Valkyrie colonies passed on the screens behind him. His words resonated in the hall, reaching the hearts and minds of those uncertain about the path of change. Then Vara, the leader of the traditionalists, took the floor. She was a formidable speaker, her words echoing the fears and nostalgia of those who felt alienated by the rapid changes. We are Valkyrie, warriors born from centuries of tradition. This new path risks everything our ancestors fought for. We must not lose ourselves in the pursuit of foreign ideals. The debate that followed was intense. Arguments were made, tempers flared, and the future of Valkyrie hung in the balance. After hours of deliberation, the vote was called. One by one, the representatives cast their votes, each one a step toward the future or a tether to the past. When the final tally came, it was a narrow victory for progress. The reforms would continue, but it was clear that the society was deeply divided. Marcus and Arya knew their work was far from over. They needed to ensure that the changes they promoted were inclusive and respectful of Valkyrie's heritage, to mend the rifts and build a unified path forward. As the assembly dispersed, Marcus felt a mixture of relief and responsibility. He had helped steer Valkyrie toward a new horizon, but the journey to reconcile the old with the new was just beginning. Together with Arya and their allies, he was ready to face the challenges ahead, knowing that true strength lay in the unity and adaptability of his adopted people. That evening, as Marcus and Arya walked through the quiet corridors of the council chambers, they were hopeful. The Valkyrie were on a path to becoming not just warriors of their own realm, but guardians of peace across the galaxy. And Marcus, once an outsider, had become a pivotal figure in shaping a legacy that would resonate for generations to come.